Hello students, in your third semester for the English Common Course you have the text titled Signatures. I'm sure that you're already familiar with the text. I'm here to make a presentation on the first lesson in your book, which is titled Excerpts from Memoirs by Pablo Neruda. This is on page 9 in your textbook. You have a short piece, an extract from the book called Memoirs by Neruda. Memoirs is Neruda's life story, which contains the Latin American history, his passion for politics and poetry, as well as his association with several world leaders. Let us move to the introduction to the author. This is on page 9 in your textbook. Those of you who do not have the textbook can look at the image on the screen. I will be reading out from this paragraph that you see on your screens now. Pablo Neruda was born as Neftali Ricardo Reyes Basalto in a small village called Parral in 1904 in Chile. He was a poet and a diplomat. A diplomat is an official who is sent from one country to another as an ambassador. He was Chile's most beloved poet. As a poet, Neruda was both a romantic and a revolutionary, and is considered as one of the most celebrated poets of the 20th century. Neruda was a staunch supporter of the Communist Party and a great admirer of Joseph Stalin, Fulgencio Batista and Fidel Castro. Let us look at the individual names mentioned here. Joseph Stalin, he was a Soviet politician who led the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s until 1953. He was a general secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, also the premier of the Soviet Union. From 1940s to the 50s, Premier is the head of the state. Next we have Fulgencio Batista. He was a Cuban military officer and politician who served as a president of Cuba in the 1940s. He later became the military dictator of Cuba from 1952 to 59, and finally he was overthrown during the Cuban Revolution, which is in 1959. Talking about the Cuban Revolution, we have Fidel Castro here. Fidel Castro was a Cuban revolutionary and politician who led the Cuban Revolution, and after overthrowing Fulgencio Batista, he became the Prime Minister of Cuba in 1959. He later became the President of Cuba in 1976. In this context, one can see the complexity in Neruda's character, the complexity in his personality, where he admired two opponents, Batista and Fidel Castro. Batista and Fidel Castro were opponents when it came to their politics. Pablo Neruda's father was employed in the railway and his mother was a teacher. He began his creative writing at the age of 13. In 1920, he contributed his articles and poems to journals, adopting the pen name Pablo Neruda, which was chosen in honor of the Czech poet Jan Neruda, owing to his father's disapproval of his poetic interests. So we see that he started writing at a very young age of 13, and what is not mentioned here is that he took the pen name Pablo Neruda when he was 16, and he did that to hide his identity while writing. He wanted to hide his identity from his father because his father did not want Neruda to be a poet. He took the pen name while he was 16, and at the age of 19 he published his first collection of poems. So he started writing at the age of 13. At the age of 16 he took a pen name Pablo Neruda, in honor of a Czech poet called Jan Neruda, and at the age of 19 he published his first collection of poems. We have the names of his major literary works, his collections of poems. Some of his major literary works are Residence on Earth, Canto General, 20 Love Poems and A Song of Despair, Pain in My Heart, Then Come Back, The Lost Neruda. And it is with the publication of his collection 20 Love Poems and A Song of Despair that he won considerable fame. He became famous through the publication of this particular work. And his books and poetry were published in various countries: Germany, Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia is today two countries, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. China, Denmark, Hungary, the United States, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was disintegrated in 1991, and the Soviet Union was divided into 12 independent countries. This happened in 91. Mexico, Cuba, Colombia, Guatemala and Argentina. This shows how Neruda's poetry was well received in countries world over. And talking about his poetry, it is important to mention some of the oft quoted lines from Neruda's poetry. You know, I've already mentioned that he was both a romantic and a revolutionary. I will begin by reading some of the famous lines from his love poems. One goes thus: "Tonight I can write the saddest lines. She loved me, sometimes I loved her too." The Malayalam translation of this particular poem is done by Balachandran Chullikad. Let me read out the Malayalam lines of this poem. കഴിയുമീ രാവിനിക്കേറ്റവും ദുഃഖഭരിതമായ വരികൾ എഴുതുവാൻ. അവളെ ഞാൻ പണ്ട് പ്രേമിച്ചിരുന്നു, എന്നെ അവളും എപ്പോഴോ പ്രേമിച്ചിരുന്നിടാം. Another one: I want to do with you what spring does with the cherry trees. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved in secret, between the shadow and the soul. Some of his lines from his revolutionary poems are also very famous. One most famous line from his revolutionary poem goes thus: "Come and see the blood in the streets. Varu ee തെരുവുകളിലെ രക്തം കാണൂ." You can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep spring from coming. There is another poem which is written about the Chilean flag, and I got its Malayalam translation, some of the lines from that particular poem on the flag of Chile. I'll read out the Malayalam lines. നമ്മുടെ നാടിൻ്റെ കൊടി ഇതുണ്ടാക്കിയത് എങ്ങനെയെന്നല്ലേ, സ്വന്തം പങ്കപ്പാടുകളുടെ പഴംതുണി കഷ്ണങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ട് നാട്ടുകാർ അത് തുന്നി. സ്നേഹത്തിൻ്റെ മിന്നും നൂലുകൊണ്ട് അവർ അതിൽ ചിത്രങ്ങൾ തുന്നി. സ്വന്തം കുപ്പായങ്ങളിൽ നിന്നോ അതോ ആകാശത്തിൻ്റെ ഞൊറികളിൽ നിന്നോ ഇത്തിരി നീലിമ നുറുക്കിയെടുത്ത് അവർ ചിലിയുടെ നക്ഷത്രങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കി. Maybe you can look up his poems later, both the lines from his love poems and his revolutionary poems. നമ്മൾ കാണുന്ന ഒരു പ്രത്യേകത, നെരൂദയുടെ എഴുത്തുകളിൽ വിപ്ലവവും പ്രേമവും ഒരേപോലെ എഴുതാൻ സാധിച്ച ഒരു കവിയാണ്. നെരൂദയുടെ കവിതകൾ കേരളത്തിലൊക്കെ ക്യാമ്പസുകളിൽ 70കളിലും 80കളിലും ഒക്കെ യുവജനങ്ങൾ പാടി നടന്നിരുന്നു. ഇന്നും നെരൂദയുടെ കവിതകൾ ആളുകൾ പാടുന്നുണ്ട്. പ്രതിഷേധങ്ങളിലും പ്രക്ഷോഭങ്ങളൊക്കെ നടക്കുമ്പം നെരൂദയുടെ വിപ്ലവ കവിതകളിൽ നിന്നുള്ള വരികൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കാറുണ്ട്. നിങ്ങൾക്ക് പോയി നോക്കാവുന്നതാണ് ഈ വരികളൊക്കെ. Yes, let's continue. So he began his diplomatic career in 1927 and it extended till 1935. And it is said, even after he won fame through the publication of his anthology 20 Love Poems and A Song of Despair, he was going through a deep financial crisis which compelled him to take up diplomatic positions. And it was also a Latin American tradition to honor poets and writers by offering them these diplomatic positions. And as a diplomat, he served in countries like Burma, Ceylon, Java, Singapore, Barcelona, Madrid, Mexico. The turning point of his life came with his duty in Spain. His friendship with leading Spanish literary figures like Federico Garcia Lorca led him to support the Republican group during the Spanish Civil War, and with this began his left-wing association. So while he was a diplomat in Madrid is in Spain, that he developed a friendship with the Spanish writer Federico Garcia Lorca, and this led him to support the Republican group during the Spanish Civil War. In 1936, a civil war broke out in Spain, and the Republican government was overthrown by a fascist military dictatorship led by General Franco. Franco was a Spanish general who led the nationalist forces. The other party was a Republican group or the Republican Party. Franco led the Nationalist Party and he overthrew the Spanish Republic during the Spanish Civil War, and he ruled Spain from 1939 to 1975 as a dictator of Spain. And it was during this period Neruda began his association with the left-wing politics. And during the civil war in Spain, he organized an evacuation of refugees from Spain to Chile, saving 2,000 lives. He wrote Canto General, a collection of poems in 1950, exclusively for the workers and the politically oppressed. Canto General also celebrates the Latin American heritage of Neruda. So this happens later in 1950. His association with the Communist Party or the left-wing politics began while he was serving as a diplomat in Madrid, Spain, and it was during this period the Spanish Civil War broke out in Spain, and the collection of poetry titled Canto General was published in 1950. So here you need to remember he wrote this particular collection of poetry while he was in exile. So how did he go into exile? In 1942, Chile had a president called Juan Antonio Rios, and this president's policies were not in favor of the common people and especially the mine workers. Neruda flayed the manner in which the government of Juan Antonio Rios silenced the protests of the workers. Neruda went on to lead the protests of the workers, as a result of which he was attacked by the mine owners, and the government ordered his arrest. In order to avoid arrest, he went into exile and he lived in various countries. And while he lived in exile, he wrote about the plight of Chileans under the rule of Juan Antonio Rios. And he returned to Chile in 1952 when the political situation changed there. He returned in 1952, and in 1950 he wrote Canto General while he was in exile. And Canto General is a collection of poems which deals with the lives of the workers and the politically oppressed. He also celebrates the Latin American heritage. So Canto General is about the Latin American history, its flora, its fauna. Above all, it pays homage to the common people of Latin America. Neruda expressed enormous satisfaction in that he could make people respect the occupation of the poet. നെരൂദ പിന്നീട് കാരണമാവാണ് ആളുകൾ കവികളെ ബഹുമാനിക്കാനും അംഗീകരിക്കാനുമൊക്കെ തുടങ്ങുന്നുണ്ട്. നെരൂദ അതിനൊരു കാരണക്കാരനാണ്. നെരൂദയുടെ കവിതകളിലൂടെ കവികളെ അംഗീകരിക്കാനും ഇഷ്ടപ്പെടാനും ഒക്കെ മനുഷ്യർ പിന്നീട് തുടങ്ങുന്നുണ്ട്. In 1950, Neruda visited Delhi for an interview with Jawaharlal Nehru. So in 1950, he came to India, met Nehru, had an interview with Nehru. His poetry appeared in several Indian languages. In 1964, Chile's National Library commemorated his 60th birthday by organizing a series of lectures on Neruda by eminent poets and writers. In 1964, when Neruda turned 60, the National Library in Chile observed his birthday by organizing several talks and lectures on him by eminent writers. In 1969, he was designated the candidate for the presidency of Chile by the Communist Party, but later he resigned to permit Salvador Allende to be the party's sole candidate. In 1970, when Salvador Allende became president of Chile, Neruda was appointed ambassador to France. So in 1969, Neruda was a candidate to be the president of Chile, but then he gave up his candidature to allow Salvador Allende to be the sole candidate of the Communist Party. So the name is pronounced as Allende, not Allende, it is Allende. So he resigned, or he gave up his candidature to allow Allende to be the party's sole candidate. And when Allende became the president of Chile in 1970, Neruda became the ambassador, or he was appointed as the ambassador to France. 1969 നെരൂദയെ ചിലിയുടെ പ്രസിഡന്റ് സ്ഥാനത്തേക്ക് മത്സരിക്കാൻ കമ്മ്യൂണിസ്റ്റ് പാർട്ടി നാമനിർദ്ദേശം നടത്തുകയും നെരൂദയെ അതിനുവേണ്ടി തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. നെരൂദ പക്ഷേ കാൻഡിഡേച്ചർ നിരസിക്കുകയും അത് സാൽവദോർ അയൻഡെക്ക് ആ കാൻഡിഡേച്ചർ നൽകുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. സാൽവദോർ അയൻഡെ ആ ഇലക്ഷനിൽ ജയിക്കുകയും സാൽവദോർ അയൻഡെ 1970 തൊട്ട് 1973 വരെ ചിലിയുടെ പ്രസിഡൻ്റായിട്ട് മാറുന്നുണ്ട്. ആ സമയത്ത് നെരൂദ അയൻഡെയുടെ അടുത്ത സുഹൃത്തും അയൻഡെയുടെ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ അഡ്വൈസറായി മാറുകയും അതോടൊപ്പം അയൻഡെ നെരൂദയെ ഫ്രാൻസിലെ അംബാസഡറായിട്ട് ചിലിയുടെ അംബാസഡറായിട്ട് നിയമിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. some of the prestigious awards that were conferred upon Neruda were the International Peace Prize in 1950, the Lenin Peace Prize and Stalin Peace Prize in 1953, and the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971. So this portion about the prizes, the awards that he won, appears in the previous slide. Neruda had great love and respect for the Cuban Revolution. He says, "I became the first poet to devote an entire book to praising the Cuban Revolution." So in honor, in praise of the Cuban Revolution, he wrote a collection of poems. He wrote a poetry collection titled Song of Great Gesture or Epic Song. This was edited in 1960, and it was the first one of the time to glorify the Caribbean and Latin American people and their struggle for freedom and better life. I'm sure you already know what the Cuban Revolution was, which was mentioned in one of the earlier slides. Cuban Revolution was led by Fidel Castro in order to overthrow the military dictator of Cuba, Fulgencio Batista, and Fidel Castro was assisted by Che Guevara. Che Guevara, the Argentine Marxist revolutionary leader. And in this collection, there is a poem titled To Fidel Castro or For Fidel Castro. And one line goes thus, "Fidel, Fidel, the people are grateful." So he means to say what Castro and Che Guevara and other revolutionaries accomplished is no small feat. So he wants the achievement and the accomplishment of Che Guevara, Castro and other revolutionaries to be noticed and acknowledged by the international community. And in this poem he also gives a warning to Castro, that is to rule gently like the Chilean Communist Party. Neruda confesses his uncompromising stand and pride in being a fighting revolutionary, as he calls himself. Neruda called himself a fighting revolutionary. He hated the ravages of war and the hate it engendered, but he strongly believed in the power of love. So he hated the ravages, the destruction caused by war, the massacre caused by war, the horrors of war, the bloodshed, the suffering, and the hatred that wars produced. He hated it. And he says, however, he believed in the power of love. And this is what he says, "I am convinced that there will be mutual understanding among human beings, achieved in spite of all the suffering, the blood, the broken glass." When the president banned communism in Chile in 1948, a warrant was issued to arrest Neruda. We already spoke about this in one of the earlier slides. That is, in 1942, Chile had a president called Juan Antonio Rios. And I told you his policies were not in favor of the common people and the mine workers. Neruda led the protests of the workers, and the government ordered his arrest. In order to avoid arrest, he went into exile and he lived in various countries during that period. After the death of Che Guevara in Bolivia in 1967, Neruda wrote several articles lamenting the loss of a great hero. All of us, being Malayalis, we are familiar with Che Guevara. Che Guevara has become the icon of revolution world over. But Che Guevara is not only an icon of revolution in Kerala, he is like the face that you see everywhere in Kerala. So I'm sure all of you know who Che Guevara is. And when Che Guevara died, he wrote several articles lamenting the loss of a great hero. Neruda condemned the United States for its involvement in the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War is also called the American War, that happened between 1955 and 1975. The war was fought between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and North Vietnam was supported by the communist countries China and Soviet Union, and South Vietnam was supported by United States, South Korea, Australia, Thailand, the anti-communist allies. So this war is also called the American War. He condemned the United States for its involvement in the Vietnam War. The Colombian novelist Gabriel Garcia Marquez called him the greatest poet of 20th century in any language. Some of you might be familiar with Marquez. Marquez is a well-known writer in Kerala because his novels have been translated into Malayalam. His important or his famous novels are 100 Years of Solitude, Love in the Time of Cholera, are some of his important famous novels. And Marquez called Neruda the greatest poet of 20th century in any language. A lot of controversy lingered around the death of Neruda when he passed away on September 23, 1973. Although officially it was reported that Neruda died due to cancer, it was interpreted by many as murder by poisoning. We know that Salvador Allende was a president of Chile from 1970 to 73. We saw that in one of the earlier slides. And in 1973, Allende was overthrown in a military coup by Augusto Pinochet. Neruda died in the hospital a couple of weeks later, and because of the timing of his death, rumors swirled that he died of sadness or even been assassinated, but the hospital recorded the cause of death as cancer. What we have here is an excerpt, a piece from Memoirs. I told you Memoirs is a life story of Neruda. Memoirs is Neruda's life story as well as a fine narration of Latin American history. It is a self-exploration of an enigmatic personality who shares his passion for poetry and politics and reveals his intimate association with Lorca, Vallejo, Picasso, Gandhi, Mao, Castro, Allende and many others. മെമോയേഴ്സിൽ നമ്മൾ കാണുന്ന നെരൂദയുടെ ജീവിതകഥയും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ലാറ്റിൻ അമേരിക്കയുടെ ചരിത്രവും നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ സാധിക്കും. അതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ നെരൂദയുടെ കവിതയോടും രാഷ്ട്രീയത്തോടും ഉള്ള ആഭിമുഖ്യവും നെരൂദയുടെ പല സുഹൃത്ത് ബന്ധങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ച് നമുക്കിവിടെ കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ട്. ഫെഡറിക്കോ ഗാർസിയ ലോർക്ക, നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ ഈ പേര് കണ്ടിരുന്നു, സ്പാനിഷ് പോയറ്റാണ്. അതേപോലെ വെലേയോ ഒരു പെറുവിയൻ പോയറ്റാണ്, പെറു എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സ്ഥലത്തെ പോയറ്റാണ്. പിക്കാസോ, സ്പാനിഷ് പെയിൻറ്റർ ആൻഡ് സ്കൾപ്റ്റർ. ഗാന്ധി, മാവോ, the former chairman of the Communist Party of China. കാസ്ട്രോ, അയൻഡെ, ഈ പറയുന്ന വ്യക്തികളും ഒക്കെ മെമോയേഴ്സിൽ പ്രത്യക്ഷപ്പെടുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇവരുമായിട്ട് നെരൂദയ്ക്കുണ്ടായിരുന്ന സുഹൃത്ത് ബന്ധങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ചും വിവരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. Perhaps I didn't live just in myself. Perhaps I lived the lives of others, says Neruda in the preface to Memoirs. His self materializes as a poet when it encompasses and assimilates the many lives he met during the course of his life. മെമോയേഴ്സിൻ്റെ തുടക്ക ഭാഗത്ത് നെരൂദ പറയുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം ഇതാണ്: I didn't live just in myself, I lived the lives of others. ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ സ്വന്തം ജീവിതം മാത്രം ജീവിക്കുകയായിരുന്നില്ല, ഞാൻ മറ്റുള്ളവരുടെ ജീവിതം കൂടെ ജീവിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. അത് കവിയാകാൻ കൂടി നെരൂദയെ സഹായിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. മറ്റുള്ളവരുടെ ജീവിതം മനസ്സിലാക്കാനും മറ്റുള്ളവരുടെ ജീവിതം ഉൾക്കൊള്ളാനും അത് സ്വന്തം ജീവിതത്തിൽ മറ്റുള്ളവരുടെ അനുഭവം ഇടകലർത്തി അനുഭവിക്കുവാനും നെരൂദയ്ക്ക് സാധിച്ചു എന്നുള്ളത് നെരൂദയെ കവിയാകുന്നതിനും സഹായിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടാവാം. The section titled The Word is a Great Paean to Poetry. നമ്മളിവിടെ കാണുന്നത് മെമോയേഴ്സിലെ ഒരു സെക്ഷനാണ്. അതിൻ്റെ പേര് The Word എന്നാണ്. It is a great paean to poetry. It praises poetry. Paean is a song of praise or victory. Neruda relishes words, savors them and fondles them in an attempt at harnessing their poetic potentials and emotions in diverse permutations, eliciting rapture. നെരൂദ ഇവിടെ എന്താ ചെയ്യുന്നതെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ, നെരൂദ വാക്കുകളിൽ ആഹ്ലാദം കണ്ടെത്താൻ ശ്രമിക്കുകയാണ്. അതേപോലെ വാക്കുകളുടെ സ്വാദ് രുചിച്ചറിയാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുകയാണ്. സേവർ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ടു ടേസ്റ്റ് സംതിങ്. വാക്കുകൾ ആഹ്ലാദിക്കുകയും വാക്കുകളുടെ സ്വാദ് നുണഞ്ഞ് അറിയാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുകയും അതേപോലെ വാക്കുകളെ തലോടുകയാണ്. വാക്കുകൾക്ക് സ്വന്തമായിട്ട് ജീവനുള്ള രീതിയിലാണ് വാക്കുകളോട് ഇവിടെ പെരുമാറുന്നത്. ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്നതിലൂടെ നെരൂദ വാക്കുകളിലെ കാവ്യാത്മകതയെ അല്ലെ കാവ്യാത്മകമായിട്ടുള്ള സാധ്യതകളെ പ്രയോജനപ്പെടുത്താനാണ് ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ വാക്കുകളിലൂടെയാണ് നമുക്ക് വികാരങ്ങൾ എക്സ്പ്രസ് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുക. അപ്പം വാക്കുകളിലെ വികാരങ്ങളും അതേപോലെ വാക്കുകളുടെ കാവ്യാത്മകമായിട്ടുള്ള സാധ്യതകളെ തിരിച്ചറിയാനാണ് ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. വാക്കുകളെ പല പെർമ്യൂട്ടേഷൻസിൽ നമുക്ക് ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും, പല രൂപങ്ങളിൽ. അതായത് നമുക്ക് ഒരു സെൻറ്റൻസിൽ നമുക്ക് പല രീതിയിൽ വാക്കുകളെ ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ സാധ്യമാകും. പെർമ്യൂട്ടേഷൻ എന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ദ ഡിഫറെൻറ്റ് വേസ് ഇൻ വിച്ച് സംതിങ് ഈസ് ഓർഡേർഡ്. അപ്പം വാക്കുകളുടെ രൂപങ്ങൾ, എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ വാക്കുകളെ ഉപയോഗിക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും. ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുന്നതിലൂടെ എങ്ങനെ വാക്കുകളിലൂടെ പരമാനന്ദത്തിലേക്ക് എത്താൻ സാധിക്കുമെന്നാണ് നെരൂദ ഈ പറയുന്ന ദ വേർഡിലൂടെ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. One sees a man drunk with poetry, revelling in its intoxication. വാക്കുകളിലൂടെ ഒരു ലഹരി കണ്ടെത്താനാണ് സാധിക്കുന്നത്. അതിലൂടെ ഉന്മത്തനാവുന്ന നെരൂദയെയാണ് നമ്മളിവിടെ കാണുന്നത്. The whole passage is rendered in italics, stands out like a poem. Memoirs ഒരു prose piece ആണ്. അതിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ് the word വരുന്നത്. So it is in italics, ഒരു കവിത പോലെ വേറിട്ട് നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. അതേപോലെ the word പോലെ തന്നെ പല ഭാഗങ്ങൾ മെമോയേഴ്സിലുണ്ട്. ആ ഭാഗങ്ങളുടെ പേരുകളൊക്കെ ഇവിടെ കൊടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. Reclining Gods, The Mask and the War, Poetry. This passage is replete with images and surrealistic expressions. It is highly suggestive and picturesque. പല രീതിയിലുള്ള ഇമേജസ്, അൺയൂഷ്വൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഇമേജസ് ആണ് നമ്മളിവിടെ കാണുന്നത്. സജസ്റ്റീവ് ആൻഡ് പിക്ചറസ്ക്, ചിത്രാപമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാഴ്ചയിലേക്ക്, ഒരു കാഴ്ചയുടെ ഒരു അവസ്ഥയിലേക്കാണ് നമ്മളെ കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്നത്. വാക്കുകളിലൂടെ നമ്മൾക്ക് പല കാഴ്ചകൾ ദ വേർഡിലൂടെ കാണാൻ സാധിക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതാണ് ഇതിൻ്റെ ഒരു രസകരമായിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യം.